Welcome to the Daily Agenda. We're here out at sea. Well, almost out at sea. Not quite. This is a nation soon to be lost at sea, I would say, within the next 3 decades, if we carry on the current trajectory. I came here first in, I think it was October 2020, after being released from HMP Gulag for daring to express my freedom of expression. It's a big no-no in this country today. Freedom of expression is verboten banned. Well, certain forms of expression are illegal, verboten, that is for certain. Mascot groups, the chosen ones, the new chosenites that is, they're exempted from it. It's because of the 3-tier legal system that we have. No, I'm sorry to disappoint you, it's not 2-tier, it's actually 3-tier. 3-tier Kia, not 2-tier Kia. How does that one sound? 3-tier Kia. Or is it actually multi-tiered, which is my experience of dealing with it. Multifaceted, multi-tiered, absolutely nothing to do with justice, just a conveyor belt churning out results. And one of the results that they want to achieve is to terrorize everyone into silence. Fearful, obedient silence. And so, having refused to be obediently silent, I was sent to HMP Gulag in 3 phases, totaling just under 4 years. And of course, I was also circulated as wanted for just under 4 years in total. You know, and I don't regret any of it, quite frankly. Not one word of regret. And it's one of the things I've come here today to make it perfectly clear that there is no regret. In the background, you probably can't see it, it's way over there, is a place called Bexhill and St Leonard's, where I used to see a probation officer who was very strict and very left field by his own admission. Dealing with him was a real minefield, quite frankly. But in the end, he turned out to be a decent enough bloke. It's just a shame about his horrible leftism and the evil regime that he works for. The establishment, that is. I remember being here in October 2020, having escaped Peterborough. They put me in a crackdown deliberately out of sheer malice, spite, because that's how these people operate. They're horrible, vile specimens. Just look what Alex Belfield and a number of other people have to say about them. Yes, they're not all the same, but you know, those who are pulling the strings are all pure evil, quite frankly. And what does it actually mean when you say that something or someone is evil? Well, I'll tell you. It's someone who is deliberately focused on and committed to a policy of malice, of causing as much pain and suffering as possible to another person or to other people, and extracting pleasure from it, or getting a huge ego trip from it, which explains the evil system perfectly, in actual fact. But what I've come here today to do is to tell all of those crooks that they failed completely. And here I am in the sunshine. It's quite breezy, as I'm sure you can hear with the crosswind, but they failed completely. And I'm still expressing myself until they decide to put me into HMP Gulag again, and they will fail if they do that, and I will continue to express myself, being no doubt about it whatsoever. And I urge everyone else to do exactly the same thing. Do not surrender your right, it's your birthright to freedom of expression. And I remember being here in that really, really cold, freezing cold wind in late October 2020, having been released from the crack den, or escaped the crack den, by renting some private accommodation just over a mile up the road there. And yes, I was sat here and laughing at them, and I'd not touched base with that properly anyway, with that probation officer up in St Leonard's. But yeah, I mean, he was the only thing about it that was particularly difficult, quite frankly, but I navigated him successfully enough. And he turned out to be malleable, quite frankly, and not amenable, but malleable. There's a big difference. But he was amenable at the end, once he was passing me off to someone else in the Stasi tyranny. And one thing I do admire about him was his honesty about being leftist. And I remember he said, over yonder there, in fact, you know, it's right over there, about 5 miles, I think it is, as not the crow flies, but as the wounded leg crawls along this pebble beach. If you've done that 5 miles, you know what I mean. And yeah, he basically said that, you know, it's foolish being anti-establishment, in other words, being anti-left. That's what he really meant. It's foolish being anti-left field, because we will stamp out, that's his own words, we will stamp out all forms of opposition. Any form of rebellion will be stamped out. Well, I don't see any rebellion having been stamped out in any way, shape or form. I see the teething problems that rebellion has experienced, as all rebellions do. It's a fact I made perfectly clear in 2017. I said quite clearly back then is that whilst one rebellion will fail for a whole number of reasons, usually piss poor planning, quite frankly, is usually the cause of it, and eventually it will succeed when two factors combine. One, when the rebellion gets its act together and plans it professionally and undertakes it professionally. It's all in the planning and the execution, quite frankly. And also when the regime is, you know, critically weakened, and we're arriving at that stage. Most people think, in actual fact, it's getting stronger. It's not, it's becoming more tyrannical. Whenever a regime becomes more tyrannical, it's because it's becoming weaker by the day. Don't forget that, weaker by the day. And this regime is getting weaker by the day. It's not getting stronger. Okay, it's enacting more legislation because it's getting weaker. This is what tyrannies do. They enact legislation like confetti thrown around at a wedding, because they know perfectly well they're falling apart. Their time is coming and going. And this is why we're seeing all of these weird and wonderful fear porn stories. These horror stories are like, pagan jihad. Pure fiction, as I said last night, absolute fantasy. One of the most grotesque fantasies I've ever encountered. But this is what they do. They have to whip their little muppets into a war dance, basically, with nasty little fairy tales, and to keep them on side. Forever, in the belief that, oh, there's going to be some sort of jihad. Well, no one's planning a jihad. No one of any description. Absolutely not. It's just completely alien to our nature and our culture. But the rebellion, socio-political rebellion, is in actual fact gathering pace, speed and scope. There is no sign whatsoever of the rebellion having failed. There is every sign that the rebellion is getting its act together. There are many more teething problems, in other words, learning curves to undergo yet. There's just no way around that, quite frankly. That's the way it has been throughout the whole of history. And when people talk about revolution, I'm not talking about an armed revolution, I'm talking about a socio-political revolution. In fact, politicians talk about it all the time, don't they? But then they condemn people like us for using their own lexicon. Well, we are using their lexicon, we're talking about revolution. And what is a revolution? A revolution is a rebellion that succeeds. A rebellion is just a rebellion that failed, or an uprising, so to speak, that failed. And the whole of history is littered with them. And so what I'm saying is that my rebellion, my uprising, my revolution, so to speak, both in theory and also in practice, was maintained here whilst they thought I was being a very good little boy, which is exactly what I wanted them to think. You know, that's how malleable they are. You know, you have to give off the impression of compliance whilst doing nothing of the sort, which is exactly what I did. I simply adopted an entirely new strategy. And because I understand strategy and tactics very well, I can adopt a new strategy quite easily, and I can develop a new strategy after that, and so on and so forth. And I will never run out of stratagem. I will never run out of tactics and ideas until this brain finally stops working. And it's the brain that we're afraid of. It's not so much the tongue and the air, the delivery, what you have to say and what you have to write. No, it's the brain. It's the brain that produces the thoughts. And what these people want to do is re-engineer the way that we think. And under no circumstances are we going to allow that to happen. Are we now? And so I would say draw heart from my experience, because here, you know, just under 5 years ago, I came to this place having been through a pretty rough time, quite frankly, for a number of years, very rough in actual fact, and I survived, and here I am today, all of these years later. And nearly 5 years ago, when I was sat on this beach in a howling wind on a grey day, early winter's grey day, I sort of tried to conjure in my mind this image right now that I am seeing. I was trying to imagine how I would feel in 5 years' time. Well, here I am, almost 5 years later, and I'm feeling okay, and about everything, you know, I'm feeling good about it. And all I'm saying to political activists out there is, you know, learn from my experience. Under no circumstances give in. Confront them with a plan and a smile on your face and a sharp wit. And there's not an awful lot that can go wrong, because persistency is the key to victory. Remember that. Persistency and ingenuity reaps victory. Eventually, we will get it right, and they will get it catastrophically wrong, and we will win. We will win. Never stop believing in that. You have to believe in yourself before you can believe in victory. Believe in yourselves.